right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Season 2 of Between Two Ewers here. Season 2, Episode 2. Eric Beavers, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm really excited to chat with you because
Yeah, I'm excited too.
you seem like my kind of dude, and I love your pots because I think your pots and my pots are like pretty colorful, and they lend themselves to each other, I think. So,
Yeah,
what are you working on right now? What are you making these days?
so right now what I've been working on in the studio is these Americanos. You can't really
Oh,
see much right now because I've got them all blacked out. I just finished glazing everything earlier in the week, and so I've got everything, blacked out for that inlay. And so today, while we're talking, I'm just gonna have a sponge and just be wiping all of that off, and you'll be able to see sort of that color pop out of there. So this is for the Clay Acar Perfect Pour
huh?
show,
Yeah.
which opens, it's like in the beginning of December, but they want the pots, by like late September. So I
Yeah.
guess it's a big show that they're going to take some time getting together. So they gave me an invitation to be in it. And so I'm just
Funny, isn't it?
working to
I
get
got
that down.
invited to the Flower City Pottery Invitational this year, and they want like 50 to 70 pots. So
Whoa.
I had to make them. It's in October, so I had to have them done. We were just talking about the golf season. I had to have them done before April, so I got a big table full of stuff over there, and people come in the
Wow.
studio like, "Ooh, can I buy that?" No, you can't have that.
Sorry. Man,
uh,
that's a lot of pots, man. That's like
so
a solo show amount of pots to have available.
you got to check it out. Yeah, there's 16 different potters, and you know what's funny is when I first kind of got into pots 15, 20 years ago, I would go to that show up in Rochester, New York. And I was like, my God, these people are amazing. So
Yeah.
to be in it now is like life coming full circle. It was wild to be asked to be a part of it.
Yeah,
So
that's cool, man. That's a good badge to wear. So good
yeah,
for
I'm
you.
excited.
Yeah.
So tell me about your. So did you glaze and glaze fire that already, or you just glaze the inside?
So I go through multiple firings, right? So I started having issues with the underglaze that I was using, and I use a variety. Like if you could see
Yeah,
my
yeah.
shelf here, I'll give you a
Right back
peek.
here.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
like
absolutely.
I've got just so many glazes that I work with, and I noticed that I started having issues with some chipping, and so I started doing a double bisque firing, and it because the idea is that there's too much surface tension. The clay is shrinking faster or more than the underglaze can shrink, and so it's causing that surface tension, and then it's just popping off in these little areas, especially on the edges. And so I started getting a piece made, bisque firing it, and then applying the underglaze on bisqueware, and then bisque firing it again so I can put the black, wash on it for all of the black inlay, and then wiping that off. And that's when I glaze the interior, and then throw it back in the kiln for a glaze firing. So
Okay.
there's a lot more firing involved, but I have less glaze issues now than I had in the past.
Yeah. So you use black underglaze for your black wash?
I do. I just water it down so that it's, real fluid and gets in all the little nooks and crannies. And back in undergrad, I did a similar thing with red iron oxide. And so I just sort of harkening back to that old experience, but just with a new material.
Okay. Very cool. I've noticed when I do underglazes and then bisque the underglaze on, when I black wash over the underglaze, it kind of gets a little too dark for me. So
Yeah.
I might try what you're thinking. That's interesting. But most of the time, so all your work is underglaze. There's no terracage. It's just Amico matte.
Yeah, all underglaze. I've just never really dipped into the terracage experience. There's something just instantaneous about, working with the underglaze.
Absolutely.
And it's more expensive. I certainly pay out of pocket for the underglaze, which, some of these underglazes can get pretty expensive, I'll admit.
Yeah, I think these are like $40 a jar, aren't they? These Amicos.
Yes, some of the Amico ones are well, and other brands too. Like I can't call out just Amico, are expensive, but my time is at a premium. And so, the old saying, cliche, time is money. And it's kind of like I could invest my time in developing, my own terracage and stuff, or I can pay out of pocket, for something that's already made, and I can just roll with that. And that's kind of the choice that I've made, is just rolling right into something that's a tried and true material to work with. And
I recently last year started trying to do both. Like I like to have a combination of like the terracage, the really matte terracage with a couple of blasts of color from underglaze because it's definitely a different color.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I love underglaze. I actually gonna try to get sponsored here by, speaking of which, Zamico Underglaze.
yeah,
Yeah, I have the same shelf as you back here. These are all terracage. This is all underglazes. And then I got some speedball up there too. And I find I kind of like to mix both. Like there's some Amico colors I really like, and then there's some speedball I like better. Like I don't know what it is, but I like speedball's white better than I do Amico's white. I don't know.
yeah. No, I get that. I've tried. I guess the three that I work with primarily are Amico, Mako, and Spectrum. And I've used Spectrum probably for the longest time, but I started run into some issues with certain colors. And so, yeah, it's kind of like what you're talking about. When I start having an issue with one color, or I find another color that works better with a gradient transition,
Hmm.
I just jump to a different product, whether it's,
Yeah.
Mako or Amico or whoever. And I've never tried Speedball. Not that I'm against it. It's certainly not because some product loyalty or something like that, but I just haven't really dipped into their repertoire of colors, so to speak.
So just last year, I started messing around with the Mako, the stroke and coat, these things.
Okay, yeah.
Speaking of which, sponsored by Mako. I got to get some sponsors. I had somebody on the show last year. Um, they have a podcast, Wheel Talk podcast, and I told them,
Oh, okay,
I was
yeah.
like, I don't care. I don't know. And they were like, no, we got 5 or 6 sponsors, and they pay us to. Okay, I mean, I don't really want to get paid. You can just send me a free case of underglaze. I don't care.
Right. In a way that's kind of getting paid, especially with, the prices of some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But so these Mako stroking coats really kind of get some crazy bright stuff. So I started messing with like that. So it's like
But yeah, that chartreuse. Do they gloss up? Are they glossy?
they get really kind of shiny. Like look at the blue on this handle, kind of gets like a crazy shiny.
Wow, yeah.
But what's very interesting is it's different because I use a red clay.
Oh yeah.
Sam Briegel. This is the one she made on the show, and then my stepson promptly was playing ball in the kitchen, dude,
Man,
dude.
it's a hard one. Yeah, I have lost so many pots in my house because of similar things, man. The kids, yeah.
His face, he had that oh shit face. I looked at him,
Yeah.
I go, I'm not mad, I'm upset.
Yes, I'm not wanting to use the word mad, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but anyway, so this was Sam Briegel. She made this one on the show, but look at her. That's the Mako stroke and coat on porcelain.
oh, okay. It looks like underglaze that has a clear coat on top.
Exactly. So it's kind of super easy, and I do it like I do with all my other stuff. I put it in these little squeeze bottles, and I can control it. It's kind of fun so far. I don't know. I just started messing with it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Anyway, so else am I doing today? I'm making some bowls today, trying to get my feet wet back into clay again. Like we were talking about, the golf season's almost over.
Yeah.
We've got a
It's
couple.
funny. I heard you talking about, the golf season and like the downtime and how frustrating it is, during the summer. And that really resonated with me, not because I get tied down, with golf or anything like that. Summertime when my kids are out of school and they're at home, it's impossible for me to get work done at home. Now I'm a night owl and I'll work, when the whole family is asleep
Yep.
until like 2 or 3, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning, because I have the option of sleeping in because I don't have to get kids ready for school or anything like that. But when they're at home during the day, it's just, that's where my attention is, whether it's like fixing lunches or just playing with the kids or whatever it is. And so
Sure.
I get it, man. It's like when summer rolls around, it's like a 2-month break from the studio where production just comes to a crawl.
Really wish I could do both. I can't figure out how. I kind of run the golf course. I am the golf pro, but I'm also kind of the GM, and it's all consuming. I don't know if that's ADHD. I can't do both, but
Right.
I'm either all in or I'm not. I don't know. I can't figure out how to do both. And I'm not a night owl because I get up at 5 a.m. to go open the golf course, and I drink way too much coffee
Yeah.
in the morning. And
Yeah,
by
you can't be a night owl with those kind of hours.
gosh, I envy those artists that can stay up and go to work and then go to their studio till midnight. I mean, you got to be 20 years old for me to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how many kids you got?
I got two.
Cool. How old?
I've got a 9-year-old daughter and I've got an 8-year-old son.
Fun right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're fun. They are a handful
Uh-huh.
at this age, but they are fun.
I have 14, 15, 17 right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you are in the throes of the teenage years.
Goodness.
I might
Sometimes,
have to be reaching out to you for some advice, man. My daughter is already showing glimpses of like that, preteen attitude, and I'm like, I just shake my head because I'm like, man, she's only 9, and I feel like
yeah,
I'm getting the first like shots fired over the bow sort of thing.
testing the waters.
Yeah, testing the waters,
My
exactly.
daughter is the kindest, the sweetest, the most fun person in the world. And, just picking her up last week, taking her back to my house, and she said something, and I was like, looked at like, wow, who was that from? Like, what was that?
Right,
It's amazing what hormones do to these poor kids. I don't remember it, of course, it was 45 years ago, but
right.
yeah, man, they're going through a lot. So I try to just smile. I make a joke out of all the stuff. My dad raised me by busting my balls.
Okay.
So, and pointing out the stupid things. And I guess we're not supposed to do that anymore.
Yeah, the gentle parenting approach.
Yeah, I don't know. I try to tell them how dumb it was. The thing they just did, I'm like, you realize how stupid that was?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I've found a similar thing that, certainly addressing the issue, but also being able to find the humor and or make humor out of situations is
Yeah.
often the most de-escalating approach to whatever issue has come up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love to make fun of the situation.
Yeah.
There's no point in getting mad. You already, whatever it is. But let's break it down to its funniest component.
Oh
Like
yeah.
let's make a joke out of how dumb that was, so you'll understand the joke instead of me thinking I'm mad. I'm not mad.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to your work that I love. So where do you get your form ideas from? I really dig your forms. Do they just kind of pop into your head? Do you see a form that you like, or
Ooh, that's a good question. I draw inspiration from a lot of different sources. Probably first and foremost is that I've been making pots a long, long time. When did I get started? So probably 23 years, I guess, making pots. And so sometimes I just sort of fall back on previous forms that I've explored,
yeah,
some of them half-heartedly, some of them full-blown. Other ideas can come from other potters that I've seen that, I
sure.
think that they've made an interesting form, and so I try to make an adaptation of that.
I do the same thing, dude. Like I'll
And
see a form on Instagram and go, "That's cool. I want to make my rendition of that."
yeah, yeah. And I think, something else that I think, drives me forward, especially with new ideas, if I'm trying to come up with something that's really unique, and seems fresh, is I used to, when I would do demonstrations and workshops and stuff, was just make a vessel, some sort of container, and then, look at the vessel and employing these, principles of design, talking about like harmony and balance and things like that. How can you move? a form forward by including all of the components, because I think that that's what's fascinating about pottery, and really what's kept me interested for this so many years, is that you have parameters to work with in pottery. And I think that that's liberating as opposed to constricting, because when you have just a blank canvas, for a painter, or a sheet of paper for a drawer, because the possibilities are endless, I think at least for my personality,
Too much.
it's too much,
Overwhelming. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because you can go in any direction. It's hard to choose what direction to move into.
Yeah.
Whereas with pottery, yes, there's tons of possibilities, but if a pitcher has to pour, and a jar needs a lid and a cup needs a handle, you've got some parameters to work with. And I think that having, these finite limitations, or these goals to move toward as far as design elements are concerned, that once that's put into focus, it gives you something to drive toward, and that in itself can be very liberating. And so when you start with just a simple vessel, like with the two ewers that I made for Companion Gallery's ewer invitational,
Yep.
the idea there, because those were two new forms, was just to make something that was a container, and it just started with this little enclosed piece, and then
Hmm.
it was like, okay, what components do we need here? We need a handle, we need a spout. Where can I find the balance? Where can I find the harmony in those,
Yeah.
within those components and elements, and how to move forward with that? That's sort of the long answer.
That's a really interesting way to kind of look at it. And I'm glad I asked the question because I'm going to be teaching a workshop out in, I think, Wisconsin this winter. And the workshop is form, ideas, and implementation. Like,
Okay.
where do you get the ideas and then how do you put them together?
Yeah.
But I really like that. That's a very interesting way to look at it because you have, like you said, set parameters. Like you have to have a drinkable lip. You can do whatever you want, but you have to come back to that lip. You know what I mean? Like you said, like a teapot. I just made a teapot. Thing's beautiful. Pours like shit. There goes that. You know what I mean? I love it, but so you can kind of like do whatever you want with clay, but you got to come back to a functionality. And that, to me, I think I agree with you. That kind of keeps me in check.
Yeah, it
You know?
really does. And I had an undergrad professor, Ron Dale, a phenomenal potter, and just so wise when it came to the functionality of pots, and I think that that was a good genesis for me in undergrad, having Ron as a professor, because every time that we had critique, it was always this scary moment. If you had a finished pot on the table and it was a
Yeah,
glazeware critique, and
you
he would
better work.
reach out and he would pick up your pots. And if it was a pitcher, he was filling it with water. And in front of the whole class, he would pour water out of that. And so you just have this moment like, oh man, is this did I even check that before he picked it up to see how
Yeah,
it, if you put anything out there that
yeah.
about it. He wouldn't troll you about it. He understood that, pots needed to have a
Art.
level of, yeah, of aesthetic value too, and that you could play with that.
Hold on, it says your recording has stopped. Eric Beavers' recording has stopped due to incoming call. You have a phone call coming in?
I did, but I cut it off. Okay.
Can you hit start again, maybe? Oh,
Oh,
mine's going.
yeah, mine's going too. It says, yeah, it's at 28 seconds.
Okay, good. Yeah. You might have to put it on do not disturb. I gotta do. I found that on my shoot. I should have told you that.
Okay.
But that's all right. We'll just if as long as it picks back up, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that having those functionality parameters is if you're going to be a functional potter. If you're not a functional potter, I guess you're a sculptor, right?
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much. Yeah.
I think it kind of I don't know. Does it make you a better potter because you have to have it work? You know what I mean? Like you have to think about somebody that's not a potter using this in their home and they're going to buy
Yeah.
it from you. You know what I mean? I think so you have to make it work no matter what you do. You can be good with clay, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I think, as potters, we all have to find, strike a balance. There's certainly more sort of traditional interpretations of pots where, the functionality of them and the design that's incorporated in it is tried and true. And
Yeah.
it's, tough to deviate from that. And then others are looking for a more artistic expression of those particular forms. And so functionality isn't necessarily discarded, percentage wise. Maybe you're looking at like a 70-30, 70% aesthetic, 30% functional, and
Mhm.
you have to decide what it is that you want out of it whenever you're making pots. If functionality is 100% your goal, then some of the aesthetic deviation, that percentage has to be lower. But if, focusing on the aesthetic, artistry of it is your primary goal, then functionality is really just a departure point as far as the design element is concerned. And so you just have to find that balance.
On my Instagram page, it says, my pots meet in the space between functionality and me having fun.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
I want them to work, but
Yeah.
honestly, like you said, my time is valuable these days. And
Yeah.
if I'm not having fun, I can't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My brain
Yeah.
won't let me do it.
Yeah.
So
You've got to enjoy what you're doing in the studio,
yeah,
or else you lose the motivation to be in there and do it. And once you've lost that artistic drive,
yeah. What's the
Uh,
point?
you, what's the point? I mean, you could
Yeah,
be doing a lot of other things that you're just clocking in for.
yeah, yeah. Punch the clock. I think that becomes reflective in your work as well. Like I can
Yeah.
see in all the people that I've talked to so far in just season one, and I have lots of their pots and I have their mugs. Speaking of which, I gotta get a mug from you. I think you can see a lot of people's personality in their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to check out my buddy Matt Hiller if you haven't met Matt or seen his work yet.
Okay.
He's out of Alaska.
Matt Hiller?
Yeah, Hiller. His spots are just mind-blowingly good, and it's really funny because I talked to him last year and I said, I just love how perfectly beautiful your pots are, right? And he said, that's funny because I love how imperfect your pots are.
Yeah.
Like you're always looking for what you don't have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. I had swapped some messages with Kirsty Cash. I don't know if you're familiar with Kirsty Cash's work. She makes beautiful, beautiful work, with these ombre gradients, different colors and stuff that are inlaid. And she was she had said something to me about, she said, I like how loose your work is. And I said, yeah, it's something that I chased for a long time. My work was very, very tight. I spent a lot of time refining the surface and smoothing and, carving and all of these different things. And I remember, again, going back to Ron Dale, he was such an influential professor and mentor. He said something in a critique once that really stuck with me, because this this person in the class, this artist was, crafting these things and then like attaching them to, and she was making sculptural stuff.
Uh-huh. A baby's
But what's up?
Was it a baby's head?
It was flowers, I think is what it
Okay.
was, and it was. Oh, sorry, I lost you. Yeah, yeah, my earbud went dead. Let me grab a new one.
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you all right.
Yeah, just go with that.
Um, okay.
Well,
Yeah,
I went, I went to Alfred for liberal arts. I found ceramics when I was at Alfred. One thing I noticed about some of these artists was they would take the craziest thing and they'd take a little baby doll head, paint it gold with spray paint, and stick it to it.
oh
I
my goodness. Yeah.
was like, okay. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, she was like making these flowers, and she was crafting these petals out of slabs, and when she attached them, they didn't look like petals. They were very thick.
Hmm.
And he did the coolest thing. He had gone over and picked up a bat that somebody had thrown a pot on. And you know
Hmm.
how there's always that cylinder that gets left on the bottom of a bat,
Yep.
where you cut it off.
Cut it off.
And it
Yep.
was paper thin.
and he took a scraper tool and he scraped that off, and then he took it off of the scraper and he folded this into a perfect flower petal, and he said, now that looks like a flower petal.
Wow. Yeah.
And the idea was, he said, you've got to let the clay be clay. And,
Yeah.
sometimes spend less time trying to force the clay to do what you want it to do,
Mhm.
and just let the clay do what clay naturally will do, and then work within those parameters.
Yeah.
And what he was saying to her resonated with me. And, my work really loosened up after that. And I was able to achieve that aesthetic that I had been pursuing for a while, because
Yeah.
I was always trying to mold the clay or model the clay to make, all of these, different effects and aesthetics and stuff. And I kind of learned that sometimes if you just work with clay and you let the clay do what it's going to do naturally, you can work within those parameters to get, these desired effects and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting because I have that written down here. I love that you embrace the maker's mark. I really try to do that as well. And I think, I was teaching a class at Aramont last year, and I made some sort of covered jar, and they're like, "Well, what are you going to do for the handle?" And I just looked down at my table, and there was a bunch of scraps, and I squished them together, and I slap it down, and I just cut it with a tool, and then cut it and stuck it on there. And they're
Yeah.
like, "That's an amazing handle." I'm like, "I don't know. It's a piece. It was a piece that I had sitting around. It doesn't need to be this ornate thing. It just needs to be something you grab the top with." You know what I mean? Sure. Just so I think, like you were saying, you spent a lot of time with early on in your career trying to make perfect surfaces, and I think everybody did, or everyone does, or should. What I found is that I'm not that good at making that. I'm better at making what comes to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it kind of reminds me of, lessons that we had in, when studying art history, right? Like, you know, people used to look at Picasso, especially unlearned people that, weren't familiar with art history, would look at Picasso's Cubism work, and they would say things like, these sort of ignorant things like, oh, well, I could do that. That doesn't look like art and stuff. And it's like, have you ever seen any of, the question is, have you ever seen any of Picasso's work outside of Cubism? It's
Hmm.
it's remarkable.
Hmm.
The guy was, an amazing illustrator, drawer, draftsman, whatever terminology you want to apply to it. And so it's not that he couldn't, it's that he chose not to.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, especially working in a discipline that requires so much craftsmanship and execution, not only for aesthetic reasons, but so that your pieces survive, a 2000-degree firing,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to have a level of craftsmanship. And I think it's important, especially in the early stages of anybody making pots, is to become familiar with that, just like Picasso did. Don't try to jump straight into cubism before you've learned how to draw.
Right.
And I think the same is true for making pots. You really need to learn and understand how things need to be made with a level of, refinement first. And then once you have that figured out, you can start to alter your aesthetic to the point that, you can sort of bend or break the rules, but you've got to know the limitations of those rules before you can
Sure.
bend and break them.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I'm teaching golf, right? I'm like, you got to hit 15,000 balls with a half a swing before you move on to your full swing. I always say, why are you swinging this far when you can't hit it from this far?
Oh
I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
telling a guy the other day, I said, when you first learned to drive, did you get behind the wheel and just stomp on the gas and go down the street? I'm like, no. You learned how to use your blinkers and parallel park
Yeah.
your way up to things, but I kind of
Yeah.
call that the Jackson Pollock effect, right? People see those splatter paintings. I can do that. No, no, you can't.
No, I know it seems easy,
Yeah.
but it's not as easy as people think.
And that's kind of a recurring theme on this show as well. If you ever get to watch more episodes or listen to more episodes, a lot of times I'm talking to people and, we tell people that are beginning in pots, you're going to go through time where you make crappy pots. You're going to make junky, heavy, freakish pots, and you got to just hang on. The same
Yeah.
thing with golf. You're going to play bad golf until you learn how to play the game. So Yeah, it's okay. Make big bad pots and then just keep trying.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to keep rolling with it, keep steaming ahead. You know, it's you're not going to learn how to make a really good handle until you've made 500 of them. And, you know, it might be that the first 450 of them are really not very good, but at 451, something magical might happen that suddenly clicks in your head that helps you to understand, you know, what it is that is going to make that handle that not only functions well, but is in harmony with the pots that you're making, you know.
Yeah.
And so you just got to keep chipping away at it. But and I find that that's especially true when it comes to finding harmony between the elements in your work. You know, when earlier when we were talking about form and how to come up with, you know, different forms and where you take inspiration from, I think creating a vessel is really the jumping point, you know, because all pots are vessels, right? Whether you're talking about a jar or a pitcher or ewer or whatever it may be. And so create the vessel first, and then when it comes to the foot, the spout, the handle, the lid, whatever it is, all of the rest of that needs to speak to the form that's already been made. And so pots can the things that you do aesthetically with the pots that you're making can be informed by what you've already made for that particular pot. You know, if the spout looks a certain way, if it's a tall and thin spout, it
Hmm.
makes sense to put a, you know, a thin, delicate handle on it that reflects that same delicacy of the spout.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to put a big chunky handle on a pot that has this, you know, very ornate or very thin spout. And so you just kind of have to pause in your making process and just reflect on what it is that you've made thus far and let that inform the next decision that you make for the next attachment, you know, that has to be put on the pot.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like if you draw a really cool picture and then you color it in and screw it all up, right? Like you can make a cool form, but if you put the wrong handle on it, you just ruin the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Is that the rule of thirds, right? Is that like
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, where you're sort of staying within the parameters of like, yeah, you know, what is it with a teapot? You have a third of the space is the spout, a third of the space is the body, and then a third of the space is the handle,
yeah,
or something to that effect.
yeah. And same way with painting, right? You got a third is the sky, a third is the landscape, and a third is the foreground or something like that. But
Yeah, something to that effect.
yeah, I'm gonna say, yeah, geez, we're just chatting away. See, we never
Yeah.
even. This is great.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Let's go.
Okay, what the name of the podcast or show, I guess, because it's not a podcast. Why Between Two Ewers? How did
Well,
you come up with that?
it's a take on Between Two Ferns. Have you ever seen Between
Right.
Two Ferns? Yes.
Right. So the Between Two Ferns, but why ewers? Like, why not pitchers or teapots or?
It kind of rolled off the tongue, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
A lot of
Okay.
people are like, "What is a ewer?" Right? So I don't know. I guess Between Two Mugs would have been boring. I guess.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was just curious if like you had a particular affinity toward viewers or what
I
it
do
was.
like ewers. It's kind of a tough. It's a tough form to make correctly.
It is tricky, yeah, for sure.
But Zach Galifianakis just kills me. I
Oh
mean,
man,
that show
hilarious.
is so funny.
Yeah,
So hopefully he comes out with more. So you sell at Companion Gallery. That's a cool spot. That's a cool gallery.
man, I love Companion Gallery. I have
That's
worked with a lot of different galleries
Yep.
over the years, and I really don't send work to any other galleries anymore. Now, some of those galleries still have work that I've made from years ago that, you know, hasn't sold or maybe has sold and there's just nothing left in inventory.
Yep.
But at this point, I'm just working exclusively with Companion.
Yep.
There's a level of familiarity there. I've been with Companion since uh 2016, so almost 10 years now. But a lot of it is just the experience. You know, Eric Botville is
Yeah.
his whole family, just really great people, and I've enjoyed my experience there.
As, that's
I always get
that's Eric.
you have to give 50% typically of everything that you sell to the gallery.
Man,
And so as an artist, I want to feel like the gallery is earning,
Doing their
that 50% that they're getting off of the work that I'm making. And I've always felt that with Companion Gallery. Like it doesn't bother me that they're getting 50% because I know that they're earning that 50%, from my sale. And if I feel like I can get that from a gallery, then I feel like I'm in the hands of a good gallery. And I've always felt that with Companion.
I love Eric Botbill's stuff. It's mind blowing to me.
Man, his pots are just so well executed.
They are just
I
from.
mean, everything from the form, the surface, the color choices,
Mhm.
the refinement with the sanding of the surfaces. Every time that I pick up one of Eric's pots, it just rolls in my hand. I'm experiencing it from a tactile standpoint, from this visual standpoint.
Yeah.
They're just great pots all
I
around.
mean, just his forms alone. I mean, you could just bisque fire his forms, and I would be like, "That's awesome," you know.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that I've done in the past is just seeing the green or the leather hard stage of Eric's pots
Ah,
when
yeah.
they're finished. In so many ways, I almost don't want to see them ever get bone dry. There's just this like satin finish that the leather hard stage has.
You know what
There,
I call that? I call that pottery porn.
yeah, yeah.
It's just like, dude, this is beautiful. Yeah, I got to get him on the show. Tell him I said hello if you see.
Okay, yeah,
Got to get him on the show either this season or next. I broke the show up into seasons because I can't do it in the summer,
right.
right? So I was actually on a golf podcast this summer, and I was telling the guy I do a podcast. I said, but I just called it season 1 and season 2, and he goes, "Oh my god, that's a brilliant idea," because he's like, I can't get a break, and I'm just yeah. So this is season 2, but yeah.
I think breaking it up is a good idea.
Yeah, I need to. Like we were talking about earlier, I need a life break here. I wish I'm still trying to figure out how to make pots for a living, but that's a big step. You know, if
It
I
is
could
a
make
big
as
step.
much, I could make as much selling pots as I do teaching golf. I absolutely would,
Oh yeah,
because
a
I like
hundred
this one
percent.
more. Which says a lot. I've been playing golf for 50 years.
Oh yeah, man,
So you
that's a
said,
lot of golf balls.
oh my gosh, I can't imagine if I counted them all. You said you've been making pots for 23 years.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to undergrad?
I got my undergrad from Ole Miss, University of Mississippi,
Yep. Sweet. Did
and
you go to
I
grad school there? Or?
no, I didn't. Kind of the rule of thumb was you know, don't come back to the school where you got your undergrad from. They really frowned on that within the program, and my situation was a little unique because when I graduated with my undergrad, Ron Dale was retiring,
Mhm.
and so Matt Long came in at the. I actually ended up doing my thesis show under Matt Long, and I
Oh,
remember having a conversation with him, saying like, "Look, man, I'm excited that you're here. I love your work,
yeah.
but I've spent years building up to this point, working under Ron. So, with all due respect, don't come in and try to undo everything that I've done,
Yeah, yeah.
and just because of a different teaching style or
Yeah.
whatever it is." And Matt was great in that he was just like, look, I respect that, I respect Ron, and so I was able to sort of finish up.
Turn my music.
But I ended up the first year looking at a lot of different grad schools. I looked at, matter of fact, I went up north and I looked in, Ohio, New York. I went to Rochester, Syracuse, a
Hmm.
bunch of different schools up north, and it was kind of disheartening. I ended up getting rejected by everybody except UMass Dartmouth offered me a postbac.
Wow.
But the postbac was basically just, hey, you can come and you can use our studio and you can study for a year. And we may or may not take you on as a grad student, but if nothing else, we'll build up your portfolio so that you can try to get into a different grad school next time around. And I thought, man, do I really want to uproot and go from Mississippi all the way to Massachusetts just to study for a year under a new person? And so I talked to Matt Long, And I said, what do you think about me sort of doing an unofficial post back here at Ole Miss? Because, you're a new professor and I've never really worked with you before. So
Hmm.
that's sort of like doing a post back. And he agreed to that. And so the second time around, um, I applied to different grad schools and I got accepted into, after a year of studying with Matt, Arizona State and Kent State
Oh, nice.
and Georgia State. And I ended up taking the Georgia State option to study with Kathy King. And that ended up kind of blowing up in my face in a sense. Like I got there and Kathy King was on sabbatical. And then,
She at Harvard now?
sorry, what'd you say?
She at Harvard now, Kathy King?
I don't
She
know
at
where Kathy King ended up at. Yeah, so my first semester she was on sabbatical and then the second semester she left. And so I had gone to study with her and I ended
Harvard?
up not even getting a single critique with Kathy.
Bummer.
And I was kind of left with the choice of, well, do I stay at Georgia State? Because I was pretty unhappy there. And it was, do I stay at Georgia State? And it was a 3-year program and tough out the next 2 years. Or do I pull out of the program after having only invested a year of my time in it and then just go somewhere else? And so that was the option I decided. And so I left Georgia State and I moved back to the Mid South and I ended up enrolling at the Memphis College of Art. And that's where I got my grad degree from, was from the Memphis College of Art.
Okay, very cool. Matt Long, I've always loved his pots. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
You don't see much from him anymore. Is he still making pots or is he?
as far as I know, I'm not in contact with Matt. I mean, it's been years since I swapped emails with him, but he was making slip trailed work for a long time, and I mean, his slip trail work was unreal. He was a master at manipulating that slip. And at some point in the year, not long after I graduated, I think Matt had been making that work for so long that maybe he felt like it was just kind of stale, for him artistically. I'm just not really sure, but he started to move in a different direction with his work.
Yeah, he did those
And
bottles, right?
yeah, and I think also that, Matt, previous to taking the position, and this is all, I have no idea. I guess I can't really speak for Matt, but this is just maybe my, perception of the situation.
Hmm.
I don't think that, he was the head of the department
Okay.
at Ole Miss, whereas previously he had been down in Florida, and I think that he was like an adjunct or like a studio tech or something like that. And so maybe it's possible that Matt just had a lot on his plate professionally. I'm not really sure,
Hmm. I
but
remember.
no, I haven't seen as much work from Matt as I had seen in the past. But again, I can't speak to Matt's situation fully, but I do love his work, and Matt was he was definitely influential on the work that I make now. I took a lot of lessons from Matt and had some really, really great critiques with him,
You
and
know what
I really enjoyed my time with him.
what I heard him say once that resonated with me was I forget what it was, like a YouTube video I was watching in my early years of trying to teach myself how to throw pots. He said, I want people to use my mug and then throw it on the floor of the pickup truck.
Yeah, I
You know?
remember that.
Yeah.
I remember him saying that he wanted his pots to have this very utilitarian, like blue collar sort of approach to it. Like not finish using it and then put it on a pedestal, out in the middle of the living room,
Yeah. Which I
but more
respect.
just like, yeah, pure, like, look, just, yes, it's art, but
Use it.
use it.
Yeah,
Use it like it's a diner mug,
exactly. I like to make big serving platters. I want people to take them to a dish to pass. I say, fill this with baked mac and cheese or Brussels sprouts and take it to your buddy's house because I want it to be in the middle of the table and people go, oh, that's a cool bowl, or
Yeah.
because then I'm part of that party. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I love that, man. I think that really gets down to, at least for me anyway, the driving force behind making pots in the first place. I think a lot of us as artists, somewhere along the way, especially if we came up through art school, we could have moved in a lot of different directions. I really loved drawing and was good at it, and I could have, been a drawing major. I was blown away by the process-oriented aspect of printmaking, and I could have moved in the area of printmaking. But on a philosophical level, to use that term, I really liked what pottery was promoting as an art form. And I think it's valuable for society in general. I think it's valuable for artists, and I know that it's valuable for me just as far as what drives my studio practice, and that you're you're making art that, and make no mistake, it's art,
Yeah.
but you're making it on this accessible level for anybody.
Yeah, you're not hanging it on a wall.
No, and that's the thing. Like, my art collection is I hold very near and dear to my heart. If there's a bare spot on the wall in my house, I feel like something needs to go on it, you know?
Yeah.
And I've got work in my attic that I've had to put stuff in the attic because I don't have any wall space left.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I try to enjoy all of those works of art on a daily basis, they're on the wall. I'm not experiencing them per se.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of seeing them. And a lot of times they fade into the background, as much as I love them and as much as they speak to me. But my mug collection, on the other hand, every morning I'm going and I'm looking at this wall of mugs,
Yep.
and I get to pick whichever one I want to use, and it does not fade into the background.
Yeah.
It's in my hand, it's on my lip. I'm looking at it, I'm feeling it, I'm touching it, I'm experiencing it. And I think that for me, that elevates pottery in the same way that people look at food as an elevated art form. Well, why? Because you're smelling it, you're tasting it, you're digesting it, of all things. It's a form of art that is truly like taking in every aspect of the human experience, as far as the way that we, move through life and experience life through all of our senses. And I think that pottery touches on a lot of those senses in a way that, a drawing or a painting or a print that's hanging on a wall does not. It's something that people are buying a work of art, and they are experiencing that work of art, and they're still getting to appreciate all of the artistic qualities of form, line, color, texture, any of the elements of art that you want to rattle off. And I think that that's really powerful for an artist to be able to have that sort of hold on the user and to captivate their attention,
Mm-hmm.
but also that they get to have this influential moment on that person's experience. They're influencing that moment of tea or coffee in the morning. Like you said, when they show up with their casserole at the potluck and everybody else has Pyrex, but theirs is this work of art that's filled with the food that everybody's going to take a scoop out of. The
Mm-hmm.
artist has just inserted themselves in that moment, and they've become a part of that. And while other art is looking down at the table and watching everybody eat from the wall,
Yeah.
pottery is at the table experiencing that moment with everybody else. And
Yeah.
to me, that is beautiful, and it's very, very powerful. And
Yeah.
and that's what really keeps me going back to the studio.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That's literally why I make pots. Like I love when somebody comes to me, oh my God, I have one of your mugs. I use it every day.
Yeah.
That's my favorite mug. I
Yeah.
just love when people say that. We're getting close on time. I got to meet a sales rep here pretty soon. So, what else do I got here? I saw you carving your bases separately. I was scrolling through your Instagram yesterday, and you had a base and you put it on a wheel and you carved the foot. Did you carve the foot and then put it onto the base of the mug?
Yeah. So you're talking about one of, I don't have a greenware one. So this
Yeah,
one is covered in black. Yeah. So this piece here is just, a separate disc. And I'll, pinch that texture there,
yeah, love it. Yeah.
all the way around. And then I put it on the wheel head, and I'll carve out a really shallow base so I can put, that disc on there.
Here, I got one of these. I got two of these sitting right next to me.
Yeah, sure form.
Oh, I
I
love
love a sure form. And so here, I'll wipe off a little bit so you can sort of see it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll carve that texture in there, and then this is a hand-built section here with the coils, and then this is a hand-built section here with the Lego, and I'll just stick them onto that base, separately.
Do
So
you
it's
extrude a
essentially
bunch of
one, two,
coils?
three, four different sections.
Do you extrude a bunch of coils
I
and then
don't.
put them together?
I don't. It kind of depends on the situation. So I'll tell you, I've got I'm either rolling them by hand, and that sort of harkens back to my genesis. Every texture that I use is not purely for aesthetic reasons. It's also for how it speaks to me and my experience and where I come from. And so rolling coils was my genesis. The very first class I ever took was a hand building class, and rolling coils was required. I mean, this guy was huge into making coil pots.
Yeah, you
I
can't
rolled,
go flap, 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 flap,
yeah,
flap.
yeah, it doesn't pat them back out. Yeah, I'm either rolling the coils or that hatching texture on some of the pots is sort of a nod to hatching from drawing classes
Hmm.
that I make with that Sureform tool. And then the Lego texture is really spawns from just time with my kid. My kids we are a big Lego house.
Legos are awesome.
Yeah, and so it dawned on me one day that something that was as important to me as far as like the time that I spend with my children, that should be incorporated into the work, and it's a cool texture, and so I sort of tied that in as well.
Yeah, it really is. My pots. I love texture. I don't like a plain surface. I got to do something to a surface. I don't know why. There's a lady around here recently that she has one of those, like, it's a slip casting place, and you show up and you paint your pottery.
Yeah.
She has this pile. I drive by her place every once a week when I go pick up my daughter, and she's got a pile of molds out back.
Oh
And
wow.
I've been texting her like, look, I'll buy some molds off you. I don't want to slip cast. I want to use them in my hand building, right? I was just whatever you got you don't like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So she was reluctant to get back to me, and I would just stop in and see her there. And I know she sees me coming across the parking lot, like, oh Christ, here comes this guy again. So last time I went in there, I brought my wife because she's a sweetheart, and I was like, look, if you want me to stop coming back, just let me know. I won't, and her husband was there that time, and he says, oh my God, has she shown you the back room? I said, I don't know what you mean. He goes, there's thousands of molds in this back room. Please take some. So we went in there, and literally there's probably 10,000 molds in this back thing. And she's like, you can have whatever you want. I said, I'll buy them. She goes, just take them. So if I don't like them, I just throw them out, right? So I just got this one the other day, which I'm just experimenting with now. So I'm going to make mugs out of these.
Oh wow.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
So that with like black wash.
There's slip cast mold?
So here, I'll show you. No,
Okay.
so I got that. That's a mold for like a big salad bowl, right? But I'm not going to slip cast. I don't like slip casting. So I'm pressing slabs into that,
Oh, okay.
and then making mugs out of a pressed mold.
Yeah.
Cutting and then adding the lip and then putting a foot on it with some texture on the foot.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about just kind of messing with that.
Yeah, that opens up a lot of different possibilities and interactions with textures and glaze surfaces. That's
Yeah.
pretty fun.
Here's this one I just was messing with too. So this is like
Oh, I saw that one. Yeah.
it's crazy. It's like an old clock, but I just press. People are like, "What is that?" I'm like, "That's actually 12."
Oh, yeah. When I saw it, I couldn't quite figure out what the texture was. Now I see it.
And that's what I like. I want people to go, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
So I'm having
Yep.
fun with that. I'm excited. I got a couple more weeks left, and then I'll be full bore back into the studio and all that good
Oh,
stuff.
that's nice.
Yeah. I can obviously talk to you for hours, dude. And this is what's fun for me about the show. Like, I was kind of known, or still am known a little bit on Instagram as the guy that always went live, right? Because I drink a shit ton of coffee, and then I'm sitting in the studio by myself, right? I'm all jacked up, and I want to chat with people, but I'm here by myself. So I just started going live because then I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I'm talking to people while making stuff. which turned into them saying, "How do you do that?" And I'm just saying, "Well, this is how I do it," you know. And they're like, "Oh, thank you so much for teaching us." I'm like, "Okay," you know. So this is what this has turned into, and I love spending time with you. I wish we could make some pots together one of these days. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So before we end today, you got to leave us with a tip. Oh, and this doesn't have to be. This could be, episode 2, part A. We can always come back here next year and just see where your work's at. You know.
Oh, okay.
If whatever you changes, whatever. But you got to leave us with a tip, life tip, tool tip, clay tip, something you learned along the way, something you figured out.
Okay. I'm definitely not qualified for life tips.
Yeah,
I'll,
me neither. Yeah.
I would say as far as a tip when it comes to like studio practice, right? I would say, that whether you're a seasoned veteran or whether you're a, you know, first getting into clay, discipline is greater than motivation. And so I think that as artists, sometimes we overuse that idea of like, oh, well, I'm not feeling motivated, or I want to create something, but I'm not feeling inspired, or I'm not, and because I don't have inspiration, I'm not motivated to get into the studio. Motivation is fleeting. You're going to have motivation one day, you're going to not have it the next. You might have it in the morning, but your motivation is not there in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Discipline, on the other hand, discipline is something that it's that driving force. It's what keeps you going into the studio to make work even when you're not motivated. And it reminds me, funny, this whole time we've been talking, I keep coming back to Pablo Picasso. Which I'm not even sure why. I guess I see some wisdom in some of his stuff. But there's this quote by Picasso. He said, "Inspiration exists, but it has to find you working." And I think
That's great.
and I think sometimes, even, and I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes we sit around waiting for inspiration, and that inspiration causes motivation. And then motivation is what causes us to go into the studio and work. And I think I don't think that that's the best way to approach, making any kind of art. Certainly pottery. I think that we really have to be disciplined to go into the studio and work, even sometimes when we don't necessarily feel like it. Because the more that we work, the better our craft becomes, and the more that we work, the more that we discover things in our process that helps us be better artists as far as our craftsmanship is concerned, but also more inspired artists because we're working, which drives the artistry and the aesthetic decisions and choices.
Sure. No, I love that. It's an inspiration is out there, but it needs to find you working. That's great. I mean, there's days where I come down to the studio and I just turn the lights back off. It's like, I'm not feeling it today. But those are the days, I think, like you're saying, is that you're like, just start making something. Like what I'll do a lot of times in the morning is first thing I'll do is roll out a slab.
Yeah.
Because then I'll feel guilty that I made that slab for no reason.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Look, I do the same thing. Like when I find that I'm in a rut, I understand my process. I know it very, very well. And it's, especially with the hand building, it's like I've got this section to build, this section to build, this section to build, and then I have to stack them all together. And so if I'm feeling in a rut, sometimes the only thing that I know that will break me out of that rut is just to make something. 'Cause I hate leaving things undone. I hate leaving any project unfinished, whether it's a movie or a book, or some, do-it-yourself project that I've started. So I'll come into the studio and I'll just start rolling some coils. And then for the rest of the day or the days that follow, I'll have in my head, there's something in there that needs to get finished. This thing in the studio needs my attention. And that will drive me to go in there and start working, like you with the slab. Just roll the slab, just get the process started.
Yeah.
And then you'll get all of those artistic marbles rolling around in your head. And that's what can help push you into the studio. Because if you don't have anything to work on and you're just waiting to get inspired, especially if you're in a rut,
Yeah.
sometimes you can be waiting a really long time to get in there and get to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And and then for me, my time is limited. I have the winter. So every day that I don't make something is one day closer to a day I can't make something. I
Yeah.
got stuff.
Yeah.
Eric, you're awesome. I love your pots. I really like chatting with you. I look forward to chatting with you again. Yeah, let's do this, man. Let's make some pots. And I'll send you a message. Maybe we'll swap a mug or something. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Edge on
That'd be
the
great.
wall. I got a really cool shelf up there, but now I need three more shelves because I got 36 mugs on one of them. I'm gonna cover the whole kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate you, man.
We'll see you soon. Be cool. I'll hit stop and we'll hang out here for a second till it uploads. All right. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
See you, buddy.
See ya.